So today we're talking about agreement, and with agreement, it's just making sure that everything that you're doing within a sentence matches alongside the style that you're doing. So there's a lot of different types of rules and things that go alongside agreement to make sure that these sentences are coming out correctly. So this presentation is good for your writing section, but also the part where you have to write essays and making sure that your sentences that you're producing also do not have agreement mistakes. So first we're going to talk about verbs. Here's a question that has to do with verbs. So I'm looking from question 1 over to where the 1 is underlined, and I'm going to read the sentence. Instead of arguing for equality based on principle, suffragists insisted that the difference between the two genders were precisely why women must be allowed. So I can tell here that difference is what the verb is talking about. Even though genders is right beside it with the S, difference is what were was talking about. So were is incorrect because it's plural, and it should be be, was. Instead of arguing for equality based on principle, suffragists insisted that the difference between the two genders was precisely why women must be allowed to participate in the government. So it needs to be singular. The other two have to do with something in the future, which doesn't match the context of the story. So those are the type of questions that we're looking through in this section. So with verbs, there's kind of two categories we need to look at. One is the type of action and whether it's happening in the past, the present, or the future. So the type could be a single action occurring only once, an action that is ongoing, or an action that is complete before some other action. So for the single action, it could look like Connor planted vegetables in the community garden, Connor plants vegetables in the community garden, or Connor will plant vegetables in the community garden. So he plants, he does it one time, single action verb. Second, the action that is ongoing. Connor was planting vegetables in the community garden this morning before noon. Connor is planting vegetables in the community garden this morning before noon, or Connor will be planting vegetables in the community garden this morning before noon. So happening over a point in time. Finally, an action that is complete before something else. So Connor had planted vegetables in the community garden every year until he gave his job to Jasmine. Connor has planted vegetables in the community garden since it started 5 years ago, and Connor will have planted vegetables in the community garden by the time the growing season starts. So notice these bolded points. So when you're taking this section of the ACT, it'll ask you things like, what belongs in this sentence? Planted, plants, or will plant? It'll give you the options and you have to pick one. So you have to be really careful about knowing the context of the whole story. So you know, is it a single action that's only going to happen once, or is it something that's going to go on for a while, or something that needs to be completed? You need to be looking at this context in order to figure out the correct verb to put within the sentence. You have to make sure that the verb agrees with the rest of it. The other thing you have to consider are subject-verb agreements. This has to do with the problem we did at the beginning. So a verb must agree with its subject in person and number. When we talk about person, we're talking about first, second, and third person. So notice how the verb ask changes based on the person that the sentence is in. So I ask you a question, you ask a question, she asks a question. So if it's in third person, we need that verb to be plural. The number is also going to affect it. So if it's singular, that apple tastes delicious, or if it's plural, apples taste delicious. So again, making sure that that verb matches the number. Is it alone, or are there plural? Now, there are some exceptions and some things that will catch you up because, of course, this is the English language. When a sentence includes two nouns, the only conjunction that will make those two nouns plural is and. If it's any other conjunction, then you have to keep it as a singular verb. there's an example listed below. So the plural example is that Slalea and Taylor are in the running club. So if it's an and, you make it plural. However, any other conjunction stays singular. So either Slalea or Taylor is in the running club, or neither Slalea or Taylor is in the running club. So sometimes when we're writing quickly, it can be easy to put are in there. Either Slalea or Taylor are in the running club. But unless that conjunction in the middle is an and, we have to keep it singular. Also, if we're using collective nouns like group or team or family, even though it represents more than one person, we still use singular verbs. Look at this, review it, have the slide showed, like go over these rules because it's really easy to make these mistakes when you're working on the test questions. Finally, we're going to talk about parallelism with verbs. This just talks about like when you are using multiple verbs within the same sentence, they have to match. So here's some examples. Like in this list, notice that every single verb is a simple past tense verb. So Chloe formulated a question, conducted background research, and constructed a hypothesis. They're all the same tense. A compound, so even when you're using two, this one uses two ing verbs. So hunting and fishing were essential to the survival of Midwestern Native American tribes, such as the Omaha. Finally, a comparison, still having two verbs. Garrett enjoys sculpting as much as painting. So you need to make sure that when you have multiple verbs, that they're still all in the same tense, in the same form throughout the sentence for the agreement to work out. Now you're going to try some practice with correcting these sentences.